Hello and welcome to my Evolution of Design video, Angel and Bob edition. Today we are going to be taking a deep dive through all my Angel and Bob factories so that I can relive the pain and maybe prevent you from going through something similar. You see, the Angel and Bob factory I built for the time-lapse, the one you can see on the screen, was not my first attempt at this thing. Depending on how you count, there are probably 10 or so different versions of this exact same factory, just with incremental improvements. This factory, the time-lapse version, was the culmination of 2 to 3 years and some 2 to 3,000 hours of gameplay. It hasn't just popped into existence. The placement, position and orientation of much of the individual parts of the factory are very specific. It isn't as chaotic as it might look. Hopefully by taking you through this design process, you can maybe pick up a few things that might be useful. I don't know. Maybe it's just interesting to see lots of different Angel and Bob factories. Who knows? Regardless, I have plunged the depths of the Factorio website to download the mods as they were when these factories were built, but this is a moving target. As the factories develop, so do the mods, so this could get messy. I'm not expecting it to be plain sailing. Here goes. Okay, so here we are, Factorio version 0.16. I've got all my mods set up as I can see. I mean, these are all the other save games I'm going to come to soon, but we're not going to get there yet. We're just going to start at the beginning. So this is number one. All the mods are up to date, so we're good to go. Okay, so here we are. So not a lot to talk about, I suppose. Right, for the start anyway. And we can see immediately that I have not got very far with this particular one. I've started to produce iron directly from the stirotite and the sapphirite from the copper and whatever, whichever way around, I always get them wrong. And then I've obviously started to build some kind of starter factory, or maybe even this might even be the final version of all the belts and inserters that I'm trying to fit in here. I mean, there are kind of echoes of the vanilla version, I suppose, and clearly, yeah, at this point I'm obviously completely unaware that there's 5 different versions of conveyor belts, because this is clearly set up just for 3. So I've started this game, this map, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I'm just kind of feeling my way through it. As for stuff to learn, I mean, yeah, at some point I've clearly discovered a technology which has changed my thinking, and I thought, well, this is wrong, I need to start from scratch. So let's have a look at factory number 2. Talk amongst yourselves. Here we go. Okay, here we are. Okay, everything's a bit dark. Okay, so I mean, I've clearly gone a little bit further than in the last one, although I have just copied this same thing straight over from the previous version. So I still haven't discovered that there's 5 belts yet. This is just an exact copy of what I had done before. There's no difference, and I've just built it further. That's all that I've done over here for the main bit of the factory. There's nothing there. I've got a bit together for the circuits. The first couple versions anyway. This is really annoying that it's saved in the dark. Okay, so I mean, it is a little bit more developed, but you know, there really isn't a lot much of changed. This just looks like it was the same as it was before. So does this, so does... I think this is the same factory that I've just saved as a different version, for one reason or another. Okay. So from my memory of this factory, what I discovered at some point was the purification bits. Where are we talking here? Oh, here we are. The leaching and everything else that goes with this is probably where I came to, and I discovered, yep, right, okay. So burning the stirotite and the sapphirite and the bobmonium directly in the furnaces is only going to get you so far, because you can't purify all of the bits and pieces that you're going to need further down the line. And I think this was the stage that I discovered that point, where I was like, okay, I've been a bit naive. Like, yeah, it just goes, it just purifies it straight away. So I think this is just the same version as the one I looked at before. It's just a more finished version. But ultimately the same problems apply. Like, I still haven't discovered the full trees yet. There are issues here. I mean, actually, the architecture for the final version is not a million miles away. Like this, the position of this is more or less where it will be in the final factory. That's quite interesting. Okay, so next. Where are we? Number 2. Yeah, number 2. There we go. Okay, so here we have the beginning part. This is obviously a blueprint I've built. Yeah, so that was right. I've obviously discovered the purification process at some point, and this is the blueprint I've built. Did I build this one in this factory? Is it in this factory? Yes, it is. Okay, so that's just a legacy of what's actually in the factory. So if we rush our way over, navigate our way through the obstacles. Okay, so the basic architecture is starting to form here. I've got the block that I want for the purification of each individual set up. So this slice deals with one of the ores. This slice deals with another of the ores. This one deals with another one, and so on and so forth. So I've got 3 other side of the main bus. So this, it's not a million miles away. We are starting to see the factory in its final forms. Obviously what I've done is I've just fed purified water directly into the system. The sulfuric water, wastewater, comes out. Where does that go? Oh, I've already got the barrels. Wowzers. Am I sure about this? Wait a second. Ah, now we get into the nuts and bolts. Right, okay, so for this factory, I built a version of it, and it didn't work. And what I remember is that it was because I had a bottleneck in the pipes. Like, I couldn't shift. That was why I was checking the sulfuric wastewater just then. It's because I remember having a bottleneck with the sulfuric wastewater, and I couldn't get it to shift enough through the system to clear it enough so that I could regularly run the purification process. Like, it was bottlenecking on the sulfuric wastewater because I was running it through pipes, and because I was so frustrated with it, I built another factory in the same map. So where are we? Here we go. We are getting there. So I just took the whole robot network, took a whole load of the supplies. I used the original factory as like an elaborate starter factory, and then built a second one. Which actually didn't take that much time, because once you've got all of the technologies researched, that's half of the job done. So if you actually start building a factory with all of the research already completed, so then it doesn't take very long to build. But the effort with Angel and Bob is that it takes so long to research the right technologies and to get the factory so it's producing the things that the research needs. That is what takes all the time. So when I actually redid it, I mean, what is the overall time on this? Let's have a look. 2. So I mean, it's 500 hours I spent on these 2 factories, but I very much doubt it was 250 hours on each. It was probably something like 350, 400 on one of the factories to get all of the stuff, and then another 100 hours on the second one. So anyway, this is when I start. This is the start. this is the start of the purification process. This is where it all kind of began. And you can see that the wastewater just comes out in a single pipe. And this, I haven't even connected those. Oh, that's magic. That's bad. What have I done for this? Oh, wait a second. It comes out here as well. Oh, right, okay. We just haven't connected to that. So the wastewater, the nitric wastewater, the fluoric wastewater, the sulfuric wastewater comes out of the materials purification process. It just gets filtered into other pipes, which seem to have been broken at some point. I've clearly been playing around with it. I think this is all set up at some point so that it worked, and I've tried to upgrade it, and then whatever upgrade I've done, it hasn't worked. Like, I mean, you can see I've upgraded all my pipes to plastic pipes. So I've had a bottleneck in my pipes, and I've tried to upgrade it. I've tried to do everything I could, and I've just got so frustrated with it that I decided to build the same factory, just the same again, just in a different place. So that's what I've done. So I think this was the point where I figured that pipes, for certain things in Angel and Bob, pipes were not going to cut the mustard. Like, because the distances are so large and the throughput needed is so huge, you can't move enough through a single pipe or several pipes, particularly with purified water and the sulfuric wastewater, the nitric wastewater, the fluorics, the chlorics. There's a lot, you produce a lot of it, and it's really difficult to pump that much through a piped system. So I think what I did with this one was I decided, okay, so the right way to go is barrels. Like, if I put stuff in a barrel, then I can calculate what the capacity is for the system through a conveyor belt, because a conveyor belt will move a set number of barrels over a period of time, and it doesn't really matter distance, and capacity, because we've got 5 different kinds of belt. Capacity isn't a problem either, because we can just upgrade to a much faster belt. So barrels, that's where this began, in this factory number 2. Although, come to saying all this, oh wait a second, no I did, that was what this was over here for. So maybe I had thought about it, and maybe I had discovered that there were extra belts in the original one. I just hadn't laid it out in an elegant way that I could read. But ultimately the process is still relatively similar. So we have a set of train stations. I mean, you'll probably get to know the general architecture that I'm trying to use on the factories. Like, it should become clear as it develops. Like, the same things are in the same places. Like, the train station is in the middle. This is where I generally start the build. So I start here, I work my way away from it. These are the 6 individual processes. I've got barrels in the system. How are they going? Where are they going to? Come on. Yeah, I should also note this was before you could get a belt immunity for your armor. So wherever, even at the end stages, you still were troubled by running on these damn belts. It's still a complete pain in the backside. So this is a little block that I've designed for the barrels. I think I seem to remember doing it based on a circuit network, but it looks like I've disconnected that because it wasn't working very well, and it didn't work very well. This was way too little space to deal with the amount of throughput you need for barrels, and that was something that I found in later versions. But we will get there. I mean, I've got a belt here that's kind of buried in no man's land. It's intertwined with this one. Yeah, I've clearly been trying to squeeze some extra capacity out of the barrels because I've got some bottlenecks somewhere. So, I mean, I suppose it's probably a good time to start running around the other bits of the factory. I haven't done that yet. So the general design of my factory is for the purification process to run upwards from the train stations. Then it runs onto a sorting belt, and I have some filter inserters. So this is all the kind of the jumble up of all the different elements that these 6 processes create. They create a complete mess of stuff. I put that onto a sorting belt, and then from that sorting belt a series of filter inserters pick it up and shift it upwards into a series of big storage warehouses which store the ores, so that I can basically run the purification process all the time. So, you know, while I'm busy building the factory, because these things take hours and hours and hours, this process can run and run and run and fill up all of these warehouses. And then, so that when I get to the point in the late stages when I need the supplies of all these ores, I have them from all of the time spent purifying it. And that was kind of part of the reason why I'm so focused on this particular portion of the factories, because when I have bottlenecks in here, it means that certain parts of this process don't run at full efficiency, so they don't all produce the same amount of output, and it's really difficult to judge how much material you get from an ore process which you can't control how much is going through. So I spent a lot of time trying to get this just right, so that it could run in the background while I'm building the factory, and I didn't have to worry about it. Because what I found from these earlier versions, from the learning process of building these factories, was that you need a lot of this stuff, and you need it to get it right in order to see the benefits of that later down the road. But I mean, again, so anyway, back to the story. So the stuff gets picked up from the sorting belt, it gets shifted upwards into these warehouses which store the ores. That's zinc. We've got tin over there, lead, I think. And then each individual ore is dealt with in a slice. So this slice kind of will deal with the zinc. This one will deal with the tin, and then I've got a little gold bit up. The tin, I generally put the tin next to the gold, because I need both the gold and the tin with the copper, which is just here. So these 3 are always just kind of next to each other, because I need the melted copper to make copper cables and other bits and pieces. So it's useful. I just tend to find that I've always found that to put those together is quite useful. I mean, the slice kind of descends a little bit. Once you get up here, we need a whole different kind of for the ore process, we need to mix different ore ingots to get the maximum efficiency out. So again, this is another feature of my designs. I have this kind of secondary bus, so with all of the ingots that are needed for the mixing, different, like for the solder, for brass, bronze, manganese. You need a whole combination of stuff to mix the individuals. Some of these individual slices need to mix with each other. So I have a kind of a little mini bus that kind of separates everything up here, and that feeds kind of the end where it mixes, so that the zinc doesn't necessarily need to be right next to the bronze and the. This is a feature of the designs. It gets more elaborate as time goes on, as the recipes get more elaborate. But the slices kind of break down. The blocks kind of break down along these lines. I'm just kind of filling the space, building what I need to do, doing what I need to get to the end. I mean, by the time I've got to this kind of minibus, I'm happy, and then everything outside of that just becomes mayhem, because I don't really care at that point. I've spent so much time on these things that I just want it to work. Like, the idea, the search for real beauty and a real sense of aesthetical beauty in these things only lasts so long when it takes 400 hours to build it. You know, you can start out with a perfect mindset and decide this is going to be beautiful, and like everything's going to be just where I want it to be, and then, you know, at some point you lose your patience with it, because it's just so mental how much stuff you need for this thing. So yeah, we're now in kind of the inner sanctum. I've just kind of run around. I'll give you some more information about this stuff when I get to the point where it's working right, because at this point in time, these are not they're not the bits of the factory that I'm particularly proud of. You know, later versions they get a much more pure kind of factory process. But this is the inner sanctum, so we've got the belts. We've been here before, I suppose. Okay. Oh, I've got to the rocket stage. I suppose that's not nothing to write home about. I think we've actually got a rocket in there. And then, okay, so we've got science, modules, modular science, trees, and then the kind of the oils and the gas. At this point, I've got no idea what I'm doing with the oils and the gas. This is, I mean, in comparison to my last, the time-lapse factory, this oil setup is primitive, to say the least. There's barely any capacity in that, and it's really badly routed and badly designed. I probably looked at that at the time and thought, wow, I've crammed it all in, it's beautiful, but, you know, looking at it now, oh, hello, didn't realise I did that. Hello, Mr. Bigfoot. Okay, so, that's this version probably done and dusted, or at least these two versions, because let's have a look, you know, we got two factories on the same damn map. And they are a little bit different. Okay, next. Okay, so that was version number 2. Now let's have a look at version number 3. Okay. So what I want to do for this one is take you through the kind of the side process a little bit more. I've just been watching, I've watched it a few times actually, the first part, which is I've just recorded and you've just watched. And what I realised is that I haven't really gone through any of the miscellaneous bits and pieces, the parts of the factory. I've mostly just concentrated on the purification process and the smelting. And that is mostly because up to this point, that's where most of my bottlenecks have occurred in these factories. So that's where most of the development has taken place. These other areas, I have generally just probably built something to get it working, and haven't really been able to investigate any bottlenecks for these other processes, mainly because I haven't got the purification process right. So until I was able to get the purification process running at full 100% at the time, and I was 100% happy with it, these other processes weren't operating, didn't need to operate at full efficiency because there were other bottlenecks on the system that prevented stuff reaching them. So I didn't really need to investigate. But at this point, we're probably getting to a stage where I'm starting to realise what is necessary with the right bits of the factory. So the process is exactly the same as it was before. So we've got the train right in the middle, same place. The ore comes off the train, it goes through the purification process, and that goes up the screen. Now, for the secondary processes, and this is mostly to do with the leaching part, in fact it's entirely to do with the leaching part, we have a whole load of secondary products that come out of the same system. So we've got a whole bunch of geodes that we need to deal with. Different colours come from different ores, so 6 different ores, 6 different colour geodes. We need a process for all of that to get that into the system. We've got a whole load of crushed rock that needs to be found a way into the system. So you can see that kind of, I'm stuck here now in the water. That comes down and works its way across the side, and that gets stored over here. I'll come to that in a second. And then you had the sulfur wastewater, the nitric wastewater, chloride, and the fluoride. And I mean, at this point in time, the recipes for dealing with those are relatively similar. It's only later stages where they start to change. So at some point in time, we start producing salt and some other waste product from the nitric, and these have to be dealt with. But at this point in time, with the mods the way that they stand with this factory, they haven't been developed that way yet. So it's mostly similar. So that's why these can be identical. They have to have slight differences later down the road. But so anyway, so we've got the crushed rock, we've got the geodes, and we've got the waste waters. And in the previous versions of the waste waters, what I was generally doing was collecting all the wastewater, putting it into barrel, and trying to find, and then shifting it to another part in the factory, which dealt with all of the sulfur wastewater for all of the factory. And again, that was a prime location for bottlenecks. So this is a that's a problem I discussed previously. So for this version, I've started to deal with the wastewaters on site within the purification process. So these ones are dealing with the sulfur wastewater, so that it doesn't need to go to a single location. I just deal with it here. But I'm barreling up the purified water, so the purified water still needs to go somewhere. This is something that I fix later down the road. So waste products, they shift left and right depending on which waste product we're looking at, and the primary products, they go from downwards on the map towards the upwards, which leads to the smelting processes. So over to the right hand side, these are the systems that I have for the mineralized water, for the geodes and the gems, the crushed rock, and then I also have to link the bricks, the blocks, concrete bricks, concrete blocks. That is generally what happens over on this right hand side of the factory. So geodes come out, they get crushed, converted into mixed gems. Mixed gems, again, this whole process, this is still an early stage process. It gets a lot more in depth in further developments in these mods, but at this point the crushed gems get converted into kind of the gem ore, and then the gem ore gets processed in much the same way. We've got down here, we've got the crushed rock and all the bricks and the blocks. Now what I generally tend to do with the crushed rock, because I want to, at the beginning of the game, when I start building, I want to get access to iron and copper and lead and tin. So I need the purification process to run, but I haven't built all of the processes to deal with the overflow of these items. So the crushed rock builds up and builds up and builds up, because at the start I haven't built this part of the factory. So what I've tended to do is build a whole load of warehouses so I can store that crushed rock, build up the stores of the iron and everything, and the copper and everything else, before I've got those stages set up, and I can still, and I just store that crushed rock so that I just leave it there just so I can deal with it at some later stage in the game once I've built this stuff, because you can't build everything at once. You've got to build, sometimes you've got to build an Agent and Bob in a way that means you can use the factory at that point in time and still develop it at some point in the future. You can tie yourself in knots. But anyway, I store the crushed rock in these warehouses, and then it gets pushed into the concrete bricks and the blocks, and then the overflow gets converted into mineral sludge, and that gets converted into, well, pretty much anything you like. What I mostly do is get it converted into fluorite and uranium, because those are the things that I think are the most cool. So that's the stuff that happens over on this right hand side of the factory. This is fairly common. It's fairly standard, I should probably say. It happens on all of the factories. And if we look in this version, we can clearly see this is the start of a block that is specifically designed to deal with a barreling loop. Again, these are things that develop over time, but this is the start of that. I mean, we looked at a smaller barreling setup that I had set up with just a couple of storage warehouses. Didn't work very well. So I'm clearly developing the idea, and this is another stage of that process. So the mineralized barrels, they come in, they get stored in a warehouse, the mineralized water gets pumped out, and then the barrels get fed back into the system. And that's what happens at this end, because this is like the working end, and then at the other end we've got the bus end. So this is kind of the output. So this outputs barrels with mineralized water in them, because I need that for other processes, and then empty barrels come in. So it is essentially the opposite of the process here. So this feeds mineralized water into the system in barrels, and then feeds empty barrels out. And then at the other side, where we've got this big bus, and this is the bus that goes right around the factory, we've got barrels with mineralized water in, so we are feeding mineralized water out, and then empty barrels are coming in. And then I'm storing it, and then any overflow is being clarified so that, you know, it doesn't overflow and it doesn't jam and block up. So this is kind of the start of my kind of journey with the barreling, and I've got a very similar kind of, well, if I've set it up on this side, I can only assume I've set it up exactly the same on the other side, because on the other side, that's probably more chemistry based items. And one of the key ingredients for the chemistry based items is the salinated water. So mineralized water gets shifted to the right of the purification process, and then salinated water gets shifted left, and we deal with all of the chemistry items over on this side. So, oh no, I spoke too soon. So I've come up with a different kind of barreling kind of loop over this side. Bit more a square version. Oh no, this is purified water. Alright. So at some stage in time I've decided that what I want to do is store the purified water. Okay, and then feed that purified water into the chemistry processes. That's not unreasonable. But I'd imagine these are running like all the time, these clarifiers. Okay, so when I started to deal with purified water, what I found was I needed ingredients in several places, but it was also an outflow of, it was like an excess product created in other processes. So what I wanted to try and do was bring the excess flow from the out products into the inputs of the processes that needed them. So that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to shift all of the purified water that's being produced as an excess in the factory. I've tried to shift it to this point. But over time, because you're creating so much purified water, more than you will ever need, you find that you just have too much of it. Like, it becomes a point where there's just you don't need the idea of bringing it all to a central point and then trying to shift it to all the places in the factory. Just becomes a lot more work than it's worthwhile. The eventual point that I came to was to create the purified water where I needed it, to use water fill so that I could set up these little lakes wherever I needed water, so I didn't have to worry about water. So that was just one less thing to worry about. And then if I had too much purified water in a particular location, then I would burn it in that location, and I wouldn't shift it to a single place, because that just became, yeah, unmanageable, completely unmanageable. But other than the purified water, we've got most of the other chemistry processes over here. So we've got fluoride, fluoric acid, hydrofluoric acid. Over this side we've got the nitric acid, we've probably got hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, that's all over this side, oxygen, hydrogen, coal, coke, you know, all of the science-based stuff kind of generally gets built over on this side, just to keep it all together in the same places. That's another thing that I found with Asian and Bob. It's worthwhile finding which processes are required for other similar processes and building them all in similar locations. It doesn't work, again, it doesn't work perfectly. Like, there are some things that just need to be, you need everywhere. Like sulfuric acid, you need everywhere in your factory. I came to a point where, I mean, I've got this main bus just circles right the way around the perimeter of the factory. So essentially any part of the factory can feed from the big bus at any point. So like, I have a lot of freedom to build items, you know, more or less where I like. But what I ended up doing with sulfuric acid was having a complete loop right the way around the factory. I think I ended up with 4 pipes deep, and that just basically acted as a big storage tank of sulfuric acid, and anywhere that needed it could get access to it. But for a lot of processes, you only need them in small places, so if you can keep those similar processes together, then you can cut down on a lot of the kind of the bottlenecks and the buses that you need to transfer stuff around. But I mean, if we carry on working our way down, so here we have kind of the trees and the farms. Again, at this point in the game, you don't really need the crystals. You don't need the crystals because the modules don't need them at this point in the game. So that whole vegetation part of the process, I don't need to worry about. That's another part of the mods that change at some later stage. I mean, I've been building one of these several of these factories, and I've had the mods be updated in the middle of a game that I've been working on, and I haven't checked that box to say do not update, and I've updated the game, and it's changed everything, and it's completely messed up these factories. In fact, there's entirely possible that at some point we're going to come across a half-finished factory because the recipes have changed and it's completely messed me up. So I've started again rather than to try and fix or change the recipes the way that they were. But so at the bottom part of the factory is normally the oil and the gas. I will always try and leave that till the last possible element because it's just a nightmare. There are some processes that you need, so lube is really useful so that you can get access to the higher speed belts. So it's sometimes useful to burn a bit of oil out in a really inefficient process, just so you've got some lube. But I always do that as a temporary process that I take apart and then reincorporate when I rebuild this bottom part, because yeah, oil gets left till last. That's that way that it works. It's always at the bottom. I like to leave it till I know that everything else is set up and working fine before I get there. Because ultimately, if the factory doesn't work, then there's no point dealing with this. I can leave it alone and just start a new factory and not have to deal with the mess. Okay, so bottom right hand corner we've got power. So it's got nuclear power. Again, we are just dealing with simple nuclear power at this point. We aren't dealing with lead oxide, not lead, mixed fuel or plutonium or deuterium. We are just dealing with uranium. That hasn't developed yet either. So then we've got steam turbines and big stores for coal. This is something I do in most of my factories, or even on vanilla, to be honest. I have a big store of coal just so I know I've got security of supply for my power. And then we're right back to where we were at the start, with all the bricks and the blocks and the crushed rock. In the middle, so the purification process comes off the train, it goes up into the smelting, and then all of the smelting comes down from this big bus. So these are all the individual materials that are coming from the ore smelting. They come down the middle, and then I feed the kind of the inner sanctum of the factory from that. So we've got, hey, okay, so now we're this is actually developing. I've moved this forward. So now, okay, so there's some elegance coming here. So I've got all of the belts set up in a line, and I sorted out this corner so that I don't have a railway that comes round, and that messes up the geometry of the squareness. I've also got the underground belts, but it's not as sophisticated as my latest ones. The latest designs are much more, I think they're much more elegant. They all kind of feed through the middle. Inserters. Okay, so I'm starting to see, this is where the development of my slice kind of theory comes in. I'm starting to kind of piece it together. That kind of process is starting to come. What we've got gun turrets, 3 or 4 different versions. We've probably got some sniper turrets as well somewhere. Rocket launching, 2 of them this time. I'm pretty sure I just saw a rocket launch. Anyway. So yeah, this is the latest version. I mean, it is actually not terrible. You know, the oil setup is, you know, fairly chunky. Still not got anywhere near enough throughput. Nowhere near. But it is coming together. Like the things are coming together. Nice. Okay, so one thing I wanted to check was at some point in these factories I've started to build, if you've watched my evolution of design video, then you've seen my kind of theory on the kind of the edge geometries versus the centerline geometries. And at some point in these factories, that is what happens. I mean, the purification processes, that was like Genesis for centerline for me, because that was the first thing that I did right through the middle, and I was like, okay, I really like that, that's really cool. How can I use that in other areas? So at some point I've started to look at how I can use that in other areas, and I just wanted to check because I know that the next area I used it in was in the smelting. Right. Okay. So this is all edge geometry stuff. So the main inputs and outputs all come through between the slices, work their way through, and then they tee off and feed the process either side. So I'm still using an edge geometry in this factory. That hasn't been developed yet. So this kind of mini bus that I was talking about earlier, I've now jammed the railway in the middle of it for reasons. Okay, it doesn't go anywhere. I don't know why I've done that. I mean, normally when I do that, it means because I've teed off to go upwards. But I haven't done that either. So this looks like a dead railway that I've built in the middle of nowhere for no reason. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'll have a look at I'll keep a note on that for next versions and see where the edge versus central geometry comes in, because that's a good moment. Right. Okay. So, next. Okay, so version number 4. We are getting there. We're certainly getting there. It's going to take a while though. Yeah, I don't know how long this video is going to be. Oh, okay. We have some issues with the mods. Right, I'm going to pause right here and I'll come back when I'm finished. Okay, so here we are, Factorio version 0.17. I really hope this isn't a pattern, but I have a funny feeling this is going to be happening more and more regularly. Just my gut feeling on it. So here we are, version 4. Yeah, mods all good. Mods all good. Right. So, what have we got here? So we've started to see we've got a new power station type. Mixed fuel. Thorium. Right, yeah, so this is when they were starting experimenting, and originally we just had uranium, and then for a brief time we had uranium and thorium, and that was it. Okay, so that's the thorium part there. We've got uranium part here. Science, still 2 rockets. I've got one in there again. So, I mean, I've clearly progressed the factory to the finish. Always good to know. Modules, that's more or less the same. To be honest, that probably doesn't change. And module science is exactly the same place, slightly bigger. Okay, so a little bit more detail about the inner sanctum now is coming together. So, we've got the first circuit board over here, and then we've got the second. Oh, I've got some belt immunity. Excellent. So first circuit board here, first computer chip here, components, and this is a regular thing. This is okay. This must be the first time I've tried this. Okay, so I think I sat down and calculated how many components I needed for each stage and worked out where they needed to go. And what I found was that 2/3 of them needed to go to the computer chip number 2, and then 1/3 of them would need to supply chips 3, 4, and 5. So what I found was that if I added up all of the components that I needed for chips 3, 4, and 5, I needed double that for chip number 2. So I've started to build the architecture in the required factory requirements into the individual component, the bits of the factory. So I've got two of these are feeding the chips. One of this is feeding all of the other bits, all the other chips that I need. We've got this is robots. So there are 4 stages. Maybe even 5 stages. I think this might be the 5th stage. If you start adding in, yep, here we go. If you add in a fusion cell, then you get a 5th stage, and it doesn't need any power. So I've got stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. So which stage? This is probably stage 1. This is probably stage 2. I'd imagine this is stage 3, and this is stage 4. Yeah, and then that comes out, and feed stage 5, which is just down here. Okay, so I mean, this is starting to look really good now. Starting to look really, really proper. Oh, also, that was one other thing that I noticed as I've just recently watched the other bits and pieces again, was that in the other factories I just had one strand of each element. So I only had one copper cable, I only had one tin cable, I had one gold cable, I had one iron, one steel, one copper, and I think this must be the first version where I must have sat down and really calculated what I needed and where it was going, because you can see I've got 3 iron, so, and I've got 2 copper, one either side of the train tracks. I've got 2 solder, 2 copper cable, 2 tin cable. So I've started to vary the amounts of stuff that I'm producing to match the amounts that I've calculated that these things need. Obviously I've got sick and tired of bottlenecks, and instead of waiting to find out what those bottlenecks might be, I've actually calculated them prior to starting building. So I've worked out, okay, this is how much of each one I'm going to need approximately, and then built that into the smelting. So I think what I've probably done is I've made an extra large iron block, and probably same again with the copper, because that has to feed not just these 2 strands of copper, but also the copper cables, the tin cables, and the gold cables. So although I'm only having 2 belts into the main factory, there's at least another belt's worth of copper being shifted into these elements. So I think that's probably what I'll have a look at. And also, this is another good idea of mine that's clearly just starting, was to put, like, these are the storage chests for all the elements. So whenever I needed to build something, I would just come over here and pick up the relevant stuff from here. And I've got a little bit over here as well. It was just one of my good ideas I had, and I was like, oh, I like that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do more of that. Up the purification process. So what we have here, yeah, I'm still barreling the purified water, so I'm still trying valiantly to reuse the purified water that I generate in the excess processes around the factory. I'm still trying to shift that to one place and use it in my chemistry part of the factory. But barrels I've got set up now just for salinated water and for mineralized water. That's fairly standard in my later factories. Like, the only things I barrel in the later factories are mineralized water, salinated water, and residual gas in the gas and oil part, in the refinery part. That was something I brought. That was very late stage. That will come apparent later on. I mean, obviously this part over here is now starting to look very, very structured. Like, okay, let's have a look at the barreling loop. So I've upgraded it to warehouses now, whereas it was just storage silos before. But ultimately throughput doesn't look like it's really changed. I mean, I've got 2 barreling thingies here. So I've kind of doubled the amount that I can get through. But ultimately the infrastructure is more or less the same. I've got the same amount of, I think it's the same amount of storage. I've got 2 clarifiers still. Okay, so that's good to know. It's still developing. Gems, the recipes are still the same as they were before. They haven't changed yet. This is my crushed stone storage, so I'm getting more confident. I need less and less temporary storage for it, so it's getting smaller. I'm obviously building this quicker and quicker as I get better at it. So then we've got power to steam, and then we've got the nuclear power just below that. That's not changed really. We've got, I mean, the same basic processes. We've got the this is where all the crushed stone and the mixed gems get shipped, so they get purified, converted into uranium fluorite. So I'm still doing exactly the same as I was before there. This is something else I probably should mention. At some point in time, I decided that what I really wanted to do was start, instead of just relying on the outputs, the overflows basically of the mixed gems and the crushed rock, what I wanted to do was have a guaranteed flow of this fluorite and uranium. So I've got this is an oxygen setup. it makes primarily, is what you probably should make it with, is use it for, is to make oxygen and hydrogen with it. But what I've done is make slag, so that I can purify that slag and get more uranium and fluorite out at the end stages. So this would not ordinarily be over on the other side, because I would have considered it a chemistry item, and there is a dedicated oxygen and hydrogen production place on the other side of the factory, but this is the slag needs to be purified and processed on this side of the factory. So I've got two places where I'm generating oxygen and hydrogen, which isn't really my favourite way of doing things, but it does actually help, because I need a significant amount of oxygen up here for steel, and sometimes, because sulfuric acid hogs the oxygen in the chemistry side, this oxygen pipe here can deplete sometimes. So it's useful to have. I found it useful to have a whole other production side for oxygen on the other side of the factory, so that I filled the steel. I had a regular supply of oxygen for the steel. So that was something that I added. I think I might have added it for a few of the other ones. I didn't know whether I noticed it, but I mean, it's now developed into a significant block. It's now got quite a dedicated part of the factory to it. Let's have a look at the smelting. Oh, here we go. You see, here's the centre line geometry coming into play. I think I've sat down, got so frustrated, and I've sat down and worked out how many belts do I need for each process to produce these amounts of materials for the main bus. And I said, okay, I need this many smelting machines. What are these? Ore processing machines. I need this many coal furnaces. I need this many induction furnaces. I need this many casting furnaces. I need this many of that. I need that many of this. And I've worked out, and I've really tried to have a crack at it. And in tandem with doing that, I've started to route those belts through the middle. This is the genesis of using the centerline geometry for the smelting parts. And where is the iron? That's probably the most pertinent, because I know for a fact. Oh yeah, okay. I know for a fact with the iron that was the peak production. That was what dictated everything else. I made the iron first, and then that kind of set everything out. I mean, you can clearly see. So you've got two on either side here for the silicon, and we've got three either side of the main central bus for iron, and then we've only got one silicon that feeds everything, really. I suppose I've obviously worked out I only need one, so that's what I've done. But with iron, I've got four lots of ingots, and that kind of flows its way upwards into. I mean, that's a ginormous block, and it's not really symmetric. It's not symmetrical either. Look, there's 7 here. So I've clearly tried to fudge more in, because the numbers told me that I needed maybe more than what this allowed me, so I've added 4 on the end. So I suppose I'm still kind of a slave to the numbers on this one, but it has kind of pushed me in a direction which is starting to produce a nice, elegant result. This is starting to look really pretty. This is pleasing. Okay, so to go through a little bit more detail about this architecture, so iron, generally speaking, gets built right next to silicon, and at this point in time, I was starting with iron and then working my way across the map. So I was working away. This is the start point, and then I worked away from there. In later versions, I started in the middle and then worked away in both directions away from that. So iron starts off on the far edge, but it ends up in the middle because I changed the way that I constructed the thing in the first place. And I play around with the size of the slices. I play around with the positions of each element. Sometimes it changes. Like sometimes titanium is next to lead, sometimes it's next to something else. All of these things, I've tried to play around with it for various reasons. Tungsten's over here. Tungsten generally is always over here as the last thing, and silver. Okay, so this is starting to develop now. This is starting to look really good. I've still got this kind of train track. Does that go anywhere? Yeah, okay, so what I've actually done is tee it off this time. But not in the middle, not lined up with the one below. Just popped in randomly for no reason. Thank you, phone. Okay. Carry on the journey round. Right. So I've moved blocks. I've moved concrete over here. I can't tell you why. I just have. Here we have a right. Okay, so we've got a dedicated salinated water block that's just appeared. This wasn't in the previous version, I don't think, or at least not that I saw. So I think it's very, very similar to the mineralized block that we were just looking at. Very, very similar. Entirely possible I've just copied it across from the other version and just tried to make it fudge. And we've got, okay, so we've got the first items that I know of that are on the other side of the bus. Okay, so the theory was early on when I was still learning what the ingredients were, was to try and keep everything on the inside of the bus, because that meant I could add further items round on the outside if I needed to. You know, if I found something that I didn't know needed to be constructed, then I had the space to bring it round, and if I had, then I could bring it across and into the main part of the factory. By building something on this side, I essentially prevented any further from any conveyor belts from being put in. So I was always very, very nervous of putting anything over on the other side of the bus, because it immediately confined how much space was available to things that I didn't know about. And you know, sometimes with these factories, I didn't know all of the processes that I was going to need to build for the whole factory. I was, you know, the recipes were always changing at this point in time. They were always getting more and more complicated, and there was always one item that, for some reason or other, you didn't need in one part of your factory that suddenly became really, really important. And trying to, you know, subsequently reroute that item through so that you could use it, always became a pain in the backside. So I was always reluctant to put items on here. I can only assume that I've done it right at the end. I mean, this actually looks like salinate. This is all salts. So I think what I've done is set up a dedicated process for sodium hydroxide. So that would have been right at the end. So for rocket fuel, I'm guessing. So I've got to the end, realised I didn't need more of it, and I'm fairly confident that this is all I need. Yeah, I mean, this is sodium hydroxide here. That wasn't salt, it's sodium hydroxide. Okay, so that's probably what I've done. I've waited until right at the end, and then I've gone, okay, I need one more block, that's where I'm going to put it. I'm happy with that. I don't need anything down here. There's nothing, no surprises waiting for me. I can build on the other side. Oh, shit. I can build on the other side with confidence. Oh, I'm surprised I survived that. That was good. Right, so standard procedure now. We've got the trees down in this corner. Well, they're not really a corner. This is the middle of the part of the factory. It's clearly a bit bigger than it was before. Maybe I've worked out, again, that I've calculated I need this many trees. Chips and modules. We've been down here. We've run through this part. Algae. Let's have a look at the oil, because that's always interesting. Okay, so, right, so what we have, this is the first step on the, right, I'm starting to understand now. See, we've got a nice kind of square block here. So, the oil and the gas, which is which, that's the gas, this is the oil, comes off the train, gets purified, then it gets pushed into these units, and then it gets pushed out into the main bus, which I think it must be here. It's not very big. Still learning, but it is. It's almost identical to for the oil and the gas. Like I've realised that I can come up with a block that's similar for both processes, so the trains can come through into the middle of it, and I can start having symmetrical processes around the train track. Yeah, so we're starting to see the centre line geometry being constructed for the oil parts as well as the smelting parts. That's interesting. And then we've got, so these are obviously all the individual oil processes that I need, like butane, ethane, polyethylene. I get lost in it sometimes. Rocket fuel, I'm guessing. Yeah, plastics and rocket fuel. Okay. Again, rocket fuel generally goes in this corner. That's fairly standard at this point, I suppose. this is, and it's obviously overflowed out of that corner, and I'm needing more space. So yeah, rocket fuel has started over here. I think seem to remember that is, yeah, ammonia. Yeah, you always need a lot of ammonia for rocket fuel. Right. Yeah. So that's what that is. That's all rocket fuels. Right. So it is starting to develop. You know, it is. I'm starting to get a handle on it. I'm starting to get a grip on these things. It's no longer completely alien to me. Right. Let's have a look at the next one. Diddly-diddly-dee. Right, so that was number 4. This is going to be number 5. Oh, god damn it. Right, okay. Pause time. Right. Sometime later, Factorio version 1.00. This should work, hopefully. I'm hoping and praying. Number 5. And boom. We are all good. Okay, excellent. And I can breathe. Right. So, where are we? Oh, I've got a perimeter wall all of a sudden. Okay, so most of these factories, in fact all of the factories up to this point, haven't had any biters. I've just been doing it in isolation, just as a technical exercise. That's probably the best way of putting it. The idea of, or at least at the start of the series of these, the idea of including biters whilst building one of these things just seemed like a complete nightmare, and I did not want to get involved in that. So this is clearly at some point I've gone, okay, I'm building all these turrets, I'm building all this ammunition, I'm building all this stuff. I want to try and use it on some biters, but I'm not going to fight them from the beginning. I'm going to set them up in peace mode so that I can only fight them at the end. However, once you've built one of these things and you get to the end and you're like, well, I've done it now. Do I really want to go and start a fight? I mean, is that something I really want to do? So yeah, I've started it. I've got some elaborate curved wall going. Wow, I've really gone for it. I've got an outpost. Even got an outpost, but it was just no. There aren't any turrets. I mean, you can they're dotted about the place, but there's nothing serious. So it was just a token effort. It really was just a token effort. Although, look, I've got loads of stuff now outside of the bus, so I'm getting a lot more confident, or I'm getting a lot more desperate. It's entirely possible that I'm running out of space inside the bus, and now I'm having to spill over because either more processes are being added, or because recipes are changing, or because blocks are getting larger. So anyway, we are in the inner sanctum. I'm now running around in super speed. This is more or less unchanged now. I think, I'm still not. I don't really use blueprints. It's not my favourite way of going about it. I like to build this. That's kind of I kind of like the building process. That's kind of what I love about this game. So the idea of using blueprints kind of is not my ideal. So the process of building this stuff is starting to become formulaic. I suppose that's probably the best way of putting it. I've got similar. I'm doing the same process over and over again now to come up with similar slices, so that things are becoming more and more elegant. Still two rockets. Modules is the same. Modular science is in the same place. Even the robots looks pretty identical. Where's section number 5 now? Section number 5 down here. So it is slightly different. It's not always identical, but it's never identical. It's never identical, it's always different. So we've got trees and vegetation, and that's now spread right over. Oh, okay, so now we've got something else. We've got a starter factory. I don't know whether this is something I was building on the other factories or not and demolishing it. I can't honestly remember. So this is actually quite interesting to see. I've got a temporary starter factory set up. This might have been the first time I've tried this. This might have been the first time I've tried having a starter factory. cool. I mean, it's really I like seeing the development of this, because it shows that I'm learning. I mean, this is the oxygen hydrogen block, and it's starting to look really, really nice. Starting to look really cool. I mean, it's still not got the throughput that I need. That I know I need now, but I did not know then. All of the oxygen gets fed into the bus, and the bus feeds wherever sulfuric acid is. What is this? Oh, I'm barreling ammonia. Is that ammonia? Yeah, I'm barreling ammonia. That might be something else I tried. What have we got over here? This is the salinated water. Okay, have we got purified water? Have we eliminated purified water from the system? I have. Okay, so this is the first time that I've eliminated the purified water from the system. So, this is another interesting point for the purification process. So from now on, what I'm doing is pumping the purified water into a storage tank, which should be yes, okay, so we've got a top-up valve, so that will only fill it up to a certain level. So this will only fill up to something like 20% of its overall capacity. This pump will only fill up to 20%, and then any overflow that's caused from the sulfur water, that just comes straight out and feeds right back into this same tank. So this tank almost acts as a control tank. It keeps a certain amount of water in the system so that you can use it for the leaching process, but not too much in the system so that the sulfur wastewater has nowhere to go. So this is a new design. This is a new breakthrough. This is the final version. This is where it actually goes. This is now. It doesn't develop much from this. This is the final version. It's probably more or less identical in this version as it is in the time lapse. This is it. This is where I've reached the point where I'm not developing it anymore. Although it still does change, because at the moment we're just dealing with sulfur, and these processes over here at some point start spitting out salt and that other thing that I still can't remember, and that has to get included into the process. At this point, the mods haven't been developed in that direction yet, so I still don't have to worry about those things just yet. Although I might have to worry about salt. Where is... maybe I didn't realise that I think I might not have realised that this is messed up, because I've got salt right here, and it's stuck in the system and not going anywhere. I wonder if that's the same for this. Yep, okay, here's that other thing. What is it called? Sodium nitrate, right. So that's now stuck in the system, and that's now blocking everything up. I generally don't know whether I knew that at the time. But anyway, process is still much the same. Everything processes upwards. I think this was something else I improved from other areas, but I'll mention it now anyway. At some point I've realised that I need 2 sorting belts. Like when you upgrade all of this stuff to the final version, 1 sorting belt is not enough. Or at least 1 green sorting belt is not enough. And what I found is that 2 blue belts will do the job. So 2 blue belts is obviously just slightly more capacity than 1 green. That's just another thing I've developed. Where are we with this stuff? So we've still got iron. Iron is still being constructed right over here. I'm still building it from the left hand side across to the right hand side. But it is starting to look neater and more symmetrical. That is definitely... It feels like I've reduced the amount of belts for the ingots. I have. No. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've still got 4. Still got 4. It's just not... The 4 aren't carrying upwards. Still got this railway line in no man's land. Don't know why it's there. Let me through. Don't know why it's here. But I am teeing off it at least. I mean, it is at least providing some function. It looks like it tees off over here as well. Yeah, okay, so we go up there as well. Okay, so I mean, probably what's happening now is we're just seeing very, very small changes, because I've got the purification and the smelting, and I'm happy with the way that I build it. I may not be happy with the way that it's completely set out, but they're probably just minor changes at this point in time. This is the slag block. That looks, that's looking really pretty with the catalyst in the middle. That's nice. I like that. This doesn't look like it's changed much. More or less the same. Here is our barreling loop for mineralized water, and yep, it's been developed. So now I've got twice the amount of barreling pumps dealing with the barrels, and I've almost got two. Have I got two individual? I've got two individual loops. It looks like one that comes out and feeds stuff north of it, and another one which comes out and feeds south. Where do you go? So this is for a mineralized water output. I'm guessing it would be for oil. Where are we? Here we are. Yep, okay. So at this point in time, what I have now is an entire system for mineralized water and salinated water. So any place in the factory where I'm where I'm making either mineralized water or salinated water, it's all being picked up by my barrel loops. So these are the full barrels of mineralized water. That's obviously going this way to feed the vegetation which needs it. Pretty sure it's vegetation. And then we've got empty barrels here, and they take the mineralized water out of the oil process, which produces sulfur wastewater. And as before, I'm dealing with that sulfur wastewater on site. So these deal with the sulfur wastewater. That outputs mineralized water, which gets on a barrel, and that feeds into the rest of the loop. So these barrel loops are getting more sophisticated now. They're starting to become factory-wide solutions to frequent problems I've obviously come up against. I've gone, I'm producing mineralized water here, and it's not in the system, and that's really unsatisfying to me. So I'm starting to develop systems so that I can bring everything through. The rest of the loop is more or less, we have a slightly different unit, but it's still doing the same job. And we've still got mineralized water coming out the front. So, I mean, that's developed a little bit as well. We've now got two loops. Just another cool thing, I suppose. Now, we've been up there. Let's work our way down to nuclear power. So, bricks, blocks. So I brought the concrete back over this side. I've brought the concrete back over this side. Yep. So, I mean, nothing is fixed. Everything moves. We have uranium power. That's a big block. That's a fairly big block, that is. That looks too big. Looks like I've overdone it. And thorium. And just thorium. Okay, so we've still just got the two different. We've still just got uranium and thorium, and that's it. Although I haven't switched on the uranium. Maybe. Yeah, I'm producing way enough power than I need, so it's fine. And we've got okay, so this is the start of the residual gas barreling solution to the problem. So what I found in earlier factories was that although these kind of butane, ethane processes, although they only produce a very, very small amount of residual gas, 25%, 20%, something like that, it can fill up the system and completely flood it, and that will end up preventing other stuff from being refined. So I've decided, well, look, I'm happy with my salinated water and mineralized water loops. Let's give it a crack with residual gas. Let's see what happens if I try barreling that up, collecting it all in one place, and let's see if that relieves the system and allows the refining to take place at a rate that I prefer. So this is kind of the residual gas block. It probably starts along here. Down here, so all of the residual gas gets fed in. We've got a whole lot of bottles, barrels. Something's gone awry there. I think that might have been a change in the formula or something. It's changed to barrels. It might have been. It's changed to bottles. Like you have to use bottles for residual gas now, but it might have been that you use barrels. I don't know. Something has changed. So all of the stages that need residual gas are now dealt with in this one place. So we've got petroleum gas. We've got a bit of a unit to deal with the oil residuals that come out of the oil process. We have synthetic gas, so No, okay, cancel that. What we have is the overflow of the residual gas. Instead of burning it and putting it into a flare, I convert it into synthetic gas, and then with using synthetic gas with hydrogen, it basically becomes just like natural gas. So you can convert it into methane. What are the three of them? Methane, ethane, and butane. The synthetic gas more or less becomes, I mean, you've got to use a catalyst and you've got to use hydrogen. It's a little bit more complicated, but more or less exactly the same as natural gas. I mean, this actually led to a different problem, which was that this process now becomes the dominant force. It becomes more important to convert the residual gas into synthetic gas, because that becomes the bottleneck, rather than shipping in new natural gas. So at some point, I'm almost certainly, yep, here we are. I've got a series of pumps that will not let any further natural gas liquids into the system so long as residual gas is above a certain level. So it'll only pump through when residual gas is below 101k. I think that's seems like a fairly specific number, but I mean, it's not really that pertinent. The point was to stop the natural gas from flowing in so that the residual gas can act as the dominant gas input for the factory. That was a development. I mean, what I found is that in this part, you know, these trains have probably sat there for a very, very long time because they're not needed. I produce so much residual gas from these processes that the main gas elements that feed into your factory aren't necessary. And also, if we look in moving on to the next development I can see straight away, is I've started to use the same sort of slice idea that I've been using for the smelting. So this slice is to convert one of the gases into one of the other gases. These are all steam crackers. So this just converts butane into benzene. This is just one slice. This other slice, if I can get in there, this other slice is converting methanol into propene. This next slice is converting methane into methanol. So I'm starting to use the same sort of architecture. It's starting to have a real form to it. It's starting to have real purpose. So, I mean, again, if I needed to upgrade this, if I needed to say I need another 4, 8 or whatever steam crackers, it would not be a problem to just demolish this part of the factory, put a few more in there, and then rebuild it with a bit extra capacity. Like, it's built in such a way that I'm not constrained by the way that I built it first. I can add to it if I need to. I mean, I don't think I actually did that. I think I probably stuck with what I had, because by this stage I've got the calculator out, I've got in-depth notes, I know more or less exactly what I need to make. So yeah, it's just interesting to note this is that first time that I've used these slices, and the bus has got a lot more serious as well. Like I feel like I've got kind of two buses, one up here which deals with the stuff that's coming from the rest of the factory, and a few, we've got naphtha, we've got a few other bits in there as well, and then these are just the gases. So I'm starting to provide multiple gases, multiple pipes for the same gas. I'm starting to add more pipes to try and increase the amount of throughput I can get with this stuff, because as I thought from the last one, there was only I think I was just having one pipe for each individual type of gas, and that really, you get limited later stages. So where are we now? This is, oh, cordite. Right. So I think this is the start of me becoming quite adventurous. So I think I've looked at the ammunition, and I thought, oh, because I've got aliens, maybe I might need some ammunition. So yeah, I've got all of the ammunition. I mean, I think that needs inputs now, but I don't think it did at the time. I think that's changed. So I've started to take on parts of the game which aren't required. Like, whereas before the factories were probably mostly tailored towards giving me all of the stuff that I need, now I'm starting to develop stuff that I want. You know, stuff that I just want to have around. I'm starting to take on more of the game. I mean, so do I need? I still don't need crystals in the modules. I have a funny feeling I've just tried this just to see. I think I've taken on all of this alien stuff. I think this alien stuff at this time didn't matter. I think it was just a dead end. It was something they were developing, but it didn't have an endpoint in the game yet. And it was only when they combined the crystals with the modules that all of this started to become part of the game if you wanted modules. But I think I just tried to tackle it anyway, just for the heck of it. I think I found that it just went nowhere. Like it produced nothing that I needed, nothing that I could use. It didn't have any purpose. But that's what that is. So we're back at the starter factory. So I suppose that's probably that. I mean, this is getting really good now. This is starting to look really, really nice. Okay, so this is my right. So this is the salt. This is the barreling loop for the salinated water, and I'm starting to take a lot more seriously how much I want to store. So I've got these tanks either side. So I've got a lot more storage. I can build it up and build it up. And I don't have to worry about burning much of it. In fact, oh no, I've got them down here. I think that's what there's probably and up here as well. Okay, so I have got places to burn it if I've got too much. But I've just brought all of that through, and then I've clearly had not enough. I clearly wanted to have it here. That's where I wanted to have the salinated loop, but I needed all of this first, so I've just put it on the other side. Not the most elegant way of doing it, but I mean it does work. It does work. All right. Okay. So we've still got similar amounts of stuff in the bus. I've still got three iron. I've got 2 aluminium now. 2 copper on this side and 1 copper on that side. I'm still playing around with it, you know. I want to bring in tungsten through, tungsten copper and tungsten and cobalt steel. Bronze, is that manganese? Gunmetal. So I'm bringing more stuff through. Let me just follow this through. That little bus, that little collection of yeah, okay. So what I've done, so this little collection of storage chests that I suggest that I started in the last map. I've decided that what I want to do is bring these elements through from the other stages in the map, the smelting part, which and I'm not using them in the factory, but I do need them to make certain chemical plants or assembly machines. So although all of this stuff was originally coming through to the factory because I needed it, these bits were lost in the smelting process. So whenever I needed something like this, I had to run over to the smelting. So for this factory, I've brought them through the main bus for no other reason than so that I can have a storage chest here, so that I can come and get these particular things much more easily. Yeah, that's exactly what I've done. Oh, and I'm starting to dedicate a series of gears. In the other ones, this was something I didn't mention before. I think I had a really rubbish gear set up either side of the main bus, and that fed the whole factory, and that was a nightmare. So at some point I decided, okay, I need to take gears more seriously. They are going to have a dedicated process next to the things that need them. And I think this is the first time I've done that. Okay, I think I'm done with this one. Let's see if the next one works. So we are on number 5. We want number 6. 6. No. Okay. Right. Well, that actually wasn't all that bad, because now we are fully up to date with all the mods, with the current version of Factorio. Everything is up to date. No more updating. I can now use the automatic mod update feature. Oh, I've got some red. I'm just going to ignore the redness, and we are going to load and see what happens. No, just load. Yep. Come on. Ah, yes, right. Okay, I doubted it for a second. But we are in. Oh, we are super slow. Why are we super slow? Exoskeleton. I've lost. Oh, well, that sucks balls. Right, okay. I'm going to pause it here and I'm going to build myself some exoskeletons because this is not very good. Okay. Okay. I have several exoskeletons and fusion reactors and I'm now running around like Superman. So, great. Factories. Let's have a look at. So now. Oh, wait a second. That's better. Right. So now we have almost a complete bus. We've got 4 iron, 2 copper. Okay. This should be almost exactly the same, other than now we have to deal with the salt and the sodium nitrate. Yes, I'm now dealing with it. Okay, so that comes out and gets dealt with on its own bus. Similarly with the salt. Where does the salt go? Here we are. That does exactly the same thing. Alright, so now we're dealing with that. I've fixed that problem. That is no longer an issue. So this whole purification process is now exactly the same. I'm now set on its design. I'm not changing it. We've got our 2 conveyor belts, the sorting belts. Everything is switched off at the moment. So why is everything switched off? Where are we? We've got materials all the way through. Oh, we have got it. We've just not. Why aren't you working? You've got tungsten. Don't know what's happened there, but I'm not really interested in finding out. Okay, so other than that, here we are. So we've got iron and copper in the middle now, and they are now the same size. So I think at some point I had a bottleneck in the copper, and I've now decided to take it just as seriously as I am with the iron. So it's now 6 wide over the whole block, rather than the 4 wide I think it was before. Yeah, I mean, it's now looking really sexy. Really, really sexy. Everything is regular. Everything is in its own little slice. I mean, that's a bit ugly. But, I mean, some of this stuff is small. You don't need a lot of it. So, yeah, I mean, this is now looking like the final version. And I suppose it's probably about the right time to say, I mean, this is technically should have been the final version. I didn't intend on working on any further versions other than this one. Like once I'd finished this, I was like, yep, I am happy with that. There's no way I can improve on it. There's no, I don't have any idea on where, there weren't any problems. There weren't any bottlenecks. It was producing mostly at its maximum rate throughout. Like it was producing what I needed it to produce. I didn't have any problems with it. So once I built it, I mean, I'm now completely super duper confident about building on this side of the bus. That is now part of my build process now. I'm not even questioning, I'm not even worrying. If I have a problem, then I have a problem. I mean, I suppose I still got, there are lanes available in here, like there's one here right between the pipes. And if I needed to start somewhere here and going down, then it could start in this pipe. There are some gaps in there that I could use. Okay, so I use that one there. That fills in that one. So I mean, there is some space, but it's not a lot of space. I'm pretty confident that I've got it. Like, and this is the point. This is the generation of the factory where I developed this oxygen and hydrogen block, the one that I talked about in Angel in the evolution of design video. That's where this comes from. This is where I took that really seriously. I wanted no issues with sulfuric acid. That was one of the big upgrades that I wanted to make for this generation of the factory. So I took it super seriously, and it works perfectly. I have no issues with it. It works excellently. I mean, these are all the barrels now that we're dealing with. That looks like purified water. Oh no, it's not. That's salinated water. They've changed the symbol. Right, that's salinated water. So yeah, I've got this whole bus of barrels now being dealt with through the middle. Everything is very, very set up. Very, very nice and elegant. Here is my salinated water barreling loop. So that's what this is dealing with. So I've now got it a full set of tanks either side. A really nice condensed little setup. Lots of clarifiers because I've always had. There will become a point where I've got to clarify a lot of salinated water where I've just got too much of it. I've got a setup up here which I've not completely finished, which was to make more sodium hydroxide for the rockets. Obviously I've not needed it. Obviously what I've got stored and what I'm creating elsewhere, I haven't needed it, so it's just kind of sat there just in case. So I'm now building elements of the factory that I know I'll need just in case, that I might need, not that I know or that I will need, but that I might need just in case, just because I've had to build that in a previous version. I'm like, well, okay, may as well fit it in somewhere. Let's keep it. You know, it was a problem. Let's not. It might be a problem again. Who knows? So yeah, that's the sulfuric acid and the oxygen blocks. I mean, they are just. This is the culmination of a lot of time. These two things, a lot of time and a lot of thought, and you know, I'll be honest. There's a lot of pride from me in this particular, just this part of the section of the factory. You know, excluding everything else. This is the purification, the smelting, and these are the parts that I have a lot of pride for, a lot of work, you know, a lot of effort and a lot of thought process has gone into those particular portions. So work our way down. We've got vegetation, we've got trees, farms. Now we need crystal shards for the modules. So this now all becomes fundamental to even having modules at all, which I suppose you could count as a bit of a luxury. It's not my favourite thing to use them in vanilla, like I've mentioned that. I mean, it's one of those things I like to have around an Agent and Bob because you just never know when you're going to come across a problem, and those modules are just lifesavers. If you've got a real problem, if you only constructed half the amount of assembly machines you need in a particular area, then those modules they just save your life. They get you out of trouble. So I always build them. I always have them. I always just have them just in case. Just so I know that I've got them. It gives me a lot more freedom, and if you know you've got a get out of jail free card, it does give you a lot more. Gives me a lot more enjoyment going forwards in the game. Like I can build with a lot more reckless abandon if I know I can fix problems as and when they come across. I don't have to stress about every little detail. But I mean, this is the crystal shards here. This is where the first version of Agent and Bob, where you needed to build it for the modules. So I gave it very, very good amount of serious attention. We've got algae still. Algae is useful. I still generally tend to have it. It's one of those things that I use very early stages. It gives you elements that are difficult to get elsewhere, but you don't necessarily need them in the end stages because you produce those things in abundance in late stages. You just struggle to get just a little bit of it at the start. But once I've constructed a whole load of algae farms, I feel like I need to use them. So I generally try and find a space for them somewhere, even if they don't really, not really necessary, but I just have space for them. I mean, we're now this bus in the middle of the oil and gas is now very, very well developed, very, very tightly packed. I know exactly what things I need. I know exactly where those things are going, and that means I can pack it ridiculously tightly. Like, I know I'm not going to miss something. I'm just super duper confident. So I know. So this is. I mean, there's no gaps here. There isn't a single gap all the way to the railway line. All jam packed. If I had to find route for another conveyor belt somewhere in here, I'd be stuffed, completely stuffed. The only way I can do this is with confidence is by knowing, by I've just been through the process that I've just explained to you, by just banging my head against the Agent and Bob brick wall. But at the end of the process, you do come up with stuff like this. It just, I mean, and if we're talking about elements that I'm really, really, really proud of and really like. This is another one. So deuterium. So in the nuclear reactors, we now have 4 different kinds. We have uranium, mixed fuel, just thorium, yeah, thorium, and then deuterium. Now, deuterium is a complete pain to create. It's a complete nightmare. But again, I'm in the mode now of taking on these sorts of challenges. So that's what this block is to do. This whole thing is to make deuterium. So we start up here with the hydrogen sulfide. This is reflected around this kind of middle axis, if you think about it like this way. There's basically 2 blocks creating deuterium, one on this side of the block and one on this side of the block, and they're just the same. I just felt like it was more elegant to create 2 identical processes rather than to try and create one massive one. So this is the start of the block, the hydrogen sulfide. That you have to enrich that hydrogen sulfide. You have to enrich it several times to get through the process, and the block just, I mean, it just keeps on going. It just keeps on. It took forever. I mean, it was a nightmare of a job. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but it's one of those things, you know, when things are really difficult, and you succeed, and I feel like I've made something that's beautiful, that's elegant, that addresses the problem in a very kind of in a way that's appealing to me. That, you know, even now I look at it, I'm still quite proud of it. In the factory, in the time lapse version, I start again. I completely start this version again. I do not copy it. I build it from scratch. I mean, part of the reason was because I had problems with this. I had to rebuild it several times because there was elements about it I didn't fully understand when I first built it, and so I had to upgrade it a little bit. And because of that, I wasn't entirely happy with it. There were bottlenecks and points where I had to sacrifice things I didn't want to sacrifice. So when I did the time lapse, I started it again. I completely started it from scratch. But anyway, yeah. So that is deuterium. That's one of those things, one of those challenges I took on. Can I get through this guy? Yes, I can. Okay, right. So oil and gas is now fairly well set up. I've got a really nice, sexy setup for it. Really big blocks, throughput, not a problem. You know, I've got gas over this side. I've got oil over this side. Both of them are more or less identical. We've got more pipes running through the oil because we've got more different things coming through. But the basic block size is the same, and that means that I can build it right next to each other, and it occupies the same amount of space. Just a very pleasing kind of it's a very pleasing part for me. Another pleasing part. This whole factory in general. Again, this is why I was happy with it. This is why I didn't intend on coming back to it. It's because I don't have any problems with it. I run around and it's elegantly set up. It's all very, it works. There's no bottlenecks. I mean, yes, there are some blank spaces that I've I failed to come up with stuff to go in them, but you know, that's my slag block again. It's different from before, but it still I'm still happy with it. No problem. I don't have any issues. We've got gems. Gems are now a lot more involved. The formulas are a lot more tricky, but you know, still achievable. Still perfectly achievable. And you know, okay, so it doesn't look perfect, but you know, with this many different processes all trying to occupy the same space, it's never going to look perfect. You can't. The only ones that I can really get perfect are the big ones, where you can get lots of things in the same space. You can deal with symmetry. When you've got lots of little things, it's really difficult to make it look elegant. It's just a case of making it work. So yeah, this was meant to be the final version. There was no reason for me to do any more, and the only reason I decided to do the time-lapse one was to make a time-lapse, was to put all of this process into a video so that, you know, so I could show off. You know, I'm not going to lie. I thought the end, I don't know why I was developing these factories. I just thought it was a lot of fun, but I always felt like I could maybe get an end process out of it and try and find some other way of using it. And when the time-lapse came up, I was like, well, that would be perfect. Like, if I can make a time-lapse video of that, that would be so cool. This is just like a super factory. It'd just be really cool. So when I came to the time lapse, the only real improvement, in fact, let's go straight into it. Let's go into that factory. Let's not muck around. Let's go have a look at that one now, because there's nothing more to talk about for this one, and I definitely know that it's going to work because we're up to date. There's no reason why it won't. So, Angel and Bob time lapse. Here we go. I said we weren't going to have any problems, but are we going to have problems? No, we're not. Right, okay. So, the only real improvement I wanted to bring to this factory, beyond, you know, making it bigger and making a few items that I wasn't making before, was to add the paths, like to add routes so I could run around. Because up until this point, I mean, you can see I'm trying to run around and navigate around a whole load of belts and pipes, and it's a complete pain in the backside. So I wanted to come up with a series of paths so I could run around the factory and get to where I needed to go fast, which is exactly what isn't happening right now. Because once again, I've run out of... Where's my exoskeletons? This is because... What has happened to my exoskeletons and what has happened to my fusion reactors? They've just vanished. Just completely disappeared. Right, okay, so I'm going to do this again. Right, I'm going to pause. Let's get some exos, let's get some fusion, and let me get some running. Okay. Right. Speed mode activated. Right, we are really super quick now. Okay, so as I was saying, the whole point of this was to add paths so that I could run around easily. And, you know, it works really well. I really like it. It's fun to run around. The other ones were not fun to run around. This is actually very, very much fun to run around for me. What it also does is it means I am confined to these kind of these rectangular blocks. Like everything has to be built and confined within that kind of space. But it is an extra challenge. But you know, it's not something that's alien to me. I mean, if you've been watching, then you see that I like cramming this stuff into small spaces. Like, and the idea of giving myself just a little bit of an extra challenge, you know, of giving myself these hard borders, you know, that's probably the next evolution. It was the next evolutionary step, you know. And again, the end result is very, very, very pleasing for me. Like everything set out in these little blocks is just so pretty. Like, I couldn't, although I didn't intend on ever building another one, and after the previous version that we just looked at, having built this one, I mean, it's far, far superior to the previous version. You know, probably not in general output terms. You know, the amount of stuff that's being produced is exactly the same. You know, the raw materials I'm producing exactly the same. I haven't played around with that. As I said, I was happy with the formula from the previous factory, so there was no reason for me to change anything. It's the same distribution of stuff, the same amount of stuff. I haven't played with that. I've just made more things with it. So, I mean, I make all the gun turrets. These are all the gun turrets, the laser turrets. What was the other one? The phasar turrets or something? Plasma turrets. You know, and the new formula for these means that I got to make hundreds of submachine guns to go into them. So that's what this block over here is for, which is new stuff, and that wasn't part of the previous version. At least not like I remember. I don't think that was in the previous map that I was happy with. But it's there now. Like, so it had to be incorporated, and I had enough space. Like, it was big enough that I had enough space. Like, it wasn't a problem. Like, purification process, that's all in its its own little block now. 3 either side, like more or less like it was before. The smelting setup. Okay, so here's an improvement. Before the ores came off the conveyor belts and they just went into some warehouses straight away, and then I started with the building of the slice. But what that meant was that I had to get the exact amount of warehouses right, for the amount that I was producing. Like I found that one slice of these ore materials would fill up, and then the moment that filled up, it stopped everything else from being produced. So by building it at the start, I immediately confined myself to how much ore could be stored in the factory. So again, next evolutionary step for me was to build it backwards. This is the end stage. This is the old top of the map, and the warehouse is right at the end. So if I need more storage, I can just add more on at the end. One other thing to note, because I was making a time lapse, I decided to make it in a portrait orientation so it could fit on a widescreen. Not portrait, landscape mode, so that it could fit on a widescreen. Whereas before it was portrait, it would have been awkward to get it on the screen. So I flipped it all around 90 degrees. You know, again, that wasn't plain sailing. That wasn't just a straightforward change. It kind of was, but it's still, you still got to fudge it. You got to get your mind around the change as well. So this is the old top of the screen, but all of the slices are now backwards, so that the ore comes all the way through, gets stored in here, and then it works its way backwards through the processes, and then this is the end stage of the process, and then it feeds its way into the belt. Where is that one? Something's not right again. Man, what has happened here? I genuinely, something's changed and I don't know what it is. I can only see this. Oh no, wait, there it is. Where's... Oh, it's because we're right in the middle. That's why it's so confusing, of course. So, that's copper, gold, tin, nickel, lead, zinc. All nicely lined up. I mean, not perfectly in their block. Like, there's a couple of spaces there that I could have used, but you know, you can't get it perfect all the time, and it all is all jammed together. Like, I couldn't have. The only way I could have used that space was to spread it all out a little bit, and then I would have been a little bit annoyed about that. So, I mean, now I've got a whole. The bus is separated from everything else, so there's a path around it. Just don't have to run through it all the time, which is a complete nightmare. The sulfuric acid block, where are you? Where have you gone? Here you are. So this is one of those rare occasions where I just used the blueprint. I was so happy with the previous version that this is the exact same setup that I had before for sulfuric acid, and if I run upwards, then we will find the exact same setup that I used for the oxygen. I was so happy with it. There was literally no point me changing it. It works so perfectly. What was the point? Like, why rebuild it? I mean, that's the point of the last factory. Like, from a factory perspective, it was just perfect. Like, I didn't need to improve it. The only way to improve it was to add non-factory elements. So that's what I did. I added these paths. I slightly upgraded and just played around with it and just made. You know, by this point I know what I'm doing, so I can manipulate it slightly better than I was before. I can predict which stuff I need, and I can, you know, I know the recipes pretty well by now. So the time lapse was just an exercise in creating a time lapse. It was to build the similar factory, not identical, nowhere near identical, never identical, but for similar processes. Bits and pieces that I cribbed from the previous one, bits and pieces that I used the same basic philosophy and then improved. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what really to say about the time lapse one. It really is just a logical extension of the of all of the versions that we come to, and it allowed me to create a really is actually my favourite time lapse by far. You know, I don't think I'll ever make. Yeah, I don't think I will ever make another Angel and Bob factory. This is probably the last one. There is no point. I can see no purpose to making another one. Like, what would I improve? What could I possibly improve to justify another 400 hours you know, plugging away at this. Which bits of this factory do I look at and think, oh, I don't like that? There's not a lot of it. You know, it's all really pleasing. Everything, there's these slices for the smelting is regular. You know, there's no, it's symmetrical. There's no irrational blocks just lost in the space. Everything is just, there would be no way for me to improve any of this. So that's I mean, that's probably the end of my Angel and Bob experiences. Like, this is the culmination of everything. This is why I've made this. What is it? It must be close to like 2 hours or so. It's got to be at least an hour and a half, hour 45. I haven't edited it yet. I haven't put it all together. Um, but yeah, this is the culmination of that. So, I mean, yeah, that's probably about all I can say. I mean, I've said a lot. Um, so yeah, I really hope it's been interesting. I really hope it's been useful. Um, but that's it. I think that's about me done with Angel and Bob. Right. Until next time.